Hey, what's up? As requested by Dog Motorfinger, I'm going to be doing a little video of a rundown of how I do mixing and just general production tips, I guess. Just for my style and getting my sound, which is nothing particularly special. I would still consider myself somewhat of a novice. As far as it goes, but I do know some tricks, and I would be more than happy to share that, and I hope that people can kind of learn from what little bit I know. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I am going to be stripping down and rebuilding basically the demo that I had just put out. It was just called Short Demo 329, and yeah, so I'm gonna strip that down completely. I'm gonna show you how I go piece by piece, layering it and processing it to kind of get the sound I want. And for that, I'm gonna be using the DAW FL Studio. When I do short demos or I do little songs or experiments, I usually use FL. Otherwise, I also play around with Reaper and Studio One, and then occasionally Pro Tools first. Still have yet to get my hands on Cubase, but I certainly mean to. I just, you can't really beat FL Studio for a lot of the MIDI stuff, and the workflow is just so user-friendly. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be using. Right off the bat, the biggest tip I can probably give to mixing is to use external monitors. Like I have up here, I have a pair of small Mackies. And they're not the best by any means, but they have improved my mix immensely since I started using them. These headphones, this is a $350 pair of Beyerdynamics headphones, and it doesn't matter how expensive your headphones is. If you only mix on headphones, it's always going to sound like shit, generally, is what I found. Or at least in comparison to my mixes on my monitor. They don't have to be good monitors, but they blow my headphone mixes out of the water. You can just hear things that you don't in your headphone, and adjusting levels and such and volumes. It's more realistic through volumes than it is through headphones. Alright, so let's get this started here. Alright, so bear with me because I'm pretty shitty explaining stuff like this, but I'm gonna go ahead and this is what my project sounds like with everything turned off. All my processing, all my effects are just completely off, and this would be completely raw. Pardon me, I think I left something on. Indeed I did. So as you can hear, it's just everything clean, basically, and I'm going to walk through how I start. So what I do first off, pretty much for every song, I'll get a riff in my head, or a groove or something, and before I start recording that, I'll generally jot down the basic rhythm of that into a drum loop. And so that way I kind of have something to aid me as I record into it, something to kind of keep me on track with the tempo and with whatever rhythm I'm using. So for my drums, I use EZdrummer, and I use the preset, I believe it's Metal Machine, yeah. And there goes my CPU. Come on. God damn it! God damn it. Okay. Whatever. It's still alive, I think. Yeah. So yeah, I use EZdrummer with the Metal Machine preset, and I have my own little preset that's based off of the Dry and Distinct. So if you were to get those two and use the Dry and Distinct preloaded preset, it would sound pretty much identical to what I use. And then the only real thing I edit in here is I do a different snare. I do the Jeanette Titanium, and then I turn the pitch up a little bit because I like higher pitched snares personally. Yeah, so what I do then is I go here to the cog into processing, and what I do is I flick that to output 1 and then do auto map outputs, and what that'll do is it'll go ahead and assign every following track here in EZDrummer to a track in your DAW. And that means I have more control over it because the mixer in EZDrummer itself is, it's a little bit, I'd say it's a little bit lacking, but I mean, that's kind of what EZDrummer is supposed to be. Like, it's not superior drummer, complication-wise. So once I have the drums out and, I have a nice rhythm going, that's when I start recording guitars. And when I record guitars, what I do is I have one channel that's direct input, and that's what I record. And then I route that track directly into something right next to it, and that's my reamp track. So for this track here, you can see I have the send in, which would be my guitar cable off my my DI box. And then because that's routing into another channel here, I'll go ahead and I'll put a guitar software in there, like Podfarm or something. So what happens is when I record, it's really only recording the clean signal, and then that clean signal is getting routed into the guitar software. So even when I'm done recording, I can still tweak the amps and stuff like that. Like I'm not recording the fully wet signal. So my tone, what I do is I keep one track to record my double tracking into, and then I have my tone doubled and split on each side here in the mixer. You can see one's panned hard left and one's panned hard right. And so I have a very simple chain. Start off with a noise gate with very little decay, tube screener, gain and tone all the way up, no drive, because I like my drive to come out of the amp itself. So I use the tread plate, which is it's a Mesa Boogie, and so midway with the drive, lots of treble, a little bit on the, lots of mid, a little bit on the treble, all that stuff. It's the same both sides, and I have a the software calls it a preamp, but it always goes after the amp for some reason. I don't know. And I just boost the high mids a little bit. So when I turn that on, you can hear God, I gotta turn that pitch proof shit off, because that's later. It's not important right now. So when I turn on one track, like my right track, it's still on. And then the left one, you can see right there, but it's only left. It's pretty djenty right off the bat, and I have the guitar level lowered a little bit because that's something that is an advantage of having monitors, is you can adjust your levels a little more accurately, in my ears anyway. So I keep it a little bit lower, and then once I go ahead and get that, roughly to where I want it to sound, I'll go ahead and I'll start working on the bass. So the bass is a bit more complicated. I have a cheap 4-string bass, so I never really get good bass tones, but I try my best. So how I do this here is I have, again, I have one DI track that I have routed into actually 2 separate tracks, and those 2 separate tracks are routed back into one track. So it's really like the DI signal split into 2, put back into 1. And the reason I do that is because I keep one track that is completely the sub bass. So I have an EQ on that is only the sub frequencies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk through that. So it inputs into here, sub bass. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the EQ so you can hear. This is what it's like without it on. Oh shit, you can't hear anything. So this is just the normal bass sound. Pretty shitty. So what I do, turn on the sub bass EQ. Okay, sure. So it just takes out the high end on that side. Kick in another instance of Podfarm here, and what I have is noise gate compressor, a lot of compression, into just a rock classic bass amp with pretty much no tweaking, into the 810 classic with pretty much no tweaking. Like the sub bass is not like, it's not terribly important. I mean it is, but like you don't need to do a shit ton to it. And then some more compression on the end. So here's what that would sound like. compression. So it's really deep now, and it's really thick, which is what I go for. Okay, and then the other side of that split is the high end of the bass. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the sub bass so you can hear just what I do to the high frequencies. So there's normal bass. I have another EQ here, and as you can see, it kind of crosses over in the middle to the sub bass, but it's just the highs. Turn that on. It's just the tinny high end of it, okay? And then I have another instance of Pod Farm, and what I have here is I have two tones. One where it's just pretty much just a clean bass sound, and then another where it's a little bit dirty. So I kind of get the best of both worlds there, and I'll turn that on so you can hear. Sounds pretty good on its own, but it doesn't have any, bass to it, which is, why I keep the two tones there. And then I'll do another EQ here, which is pretty wavy. I know it looks weird. Take out some of the bass on this because, having Pod Farm brings it back a little bit. Boost the mids, and then the highs were super tinny, super just shitty sounding, kind of ruined the mix, so I took them out a little bit. This is what it sounds like now. It sounds pretty filtered, because it is. And then occasionally, when I'm feeling like, taking a risk or something, I'll go ahead and use FL Studio's Sound Goodizer, and it's really absolutely cheating. It's absolutely cheating, but it's there, so if you know how to use it, you might as well use it, right? That's how I figure, So turn that on. It compresses, it boosts the volume, it does a little bit of EQ, I don't know if it puts some tape saturation on it or something, but it just sounds so much warmer and so much more pleasant, so, that's easy. And then the two of them together now. I'd call that a pretty good bass tone with a cheap Tobias 4-string that I have tuned down to, Nolly's 5-string. So yeah, and then I have a bus, which both of those, the high and the low, are routed to back into one channel. And for that, I have more EQing, so I'm going to go ahead and play the regular and put that back on. That brings back some of the highs, cuts out some of the mids where the guitar lies. And I do another Sound Goodizer, because just figured why not, and just listen to the difference it makes. I don't even have a subwoofer for these speakers, but the floor beneath me is rattling a little bit, so it's good stuff. And then more compression. So yeah, the bass is absolutely the most overproduced part of anything I do, and that's because the bass needs to be the most overproduced part. It's, dynamics are a good thing, but as you can see here in the waveform, it's impossible to control with a cheap bass. So I kind of need to keep that on there. So that's guitar and bass right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn those guys back on. And then you can hear what they sound like together. Again, take a look at the volume here and watch as the faders kind of come up. I keep the guitar and the bass close to even, but the bass is always a little bit lower, but just enough so that you can still hear it, in the mix. I don't want to keep the bass out of my mix entirely. And you don't really have to worry about these last two. It's just a little bit of EQing and then some tape saturation, which really you don't hear it, to be honest. I mean, it's just something I do because I read it somewhere, and it really does make a difference in the sound, to be honest. So yeah, sounds beefy. Alright, and then the main last thing is the drums. So I'm going to go ahead and turn them back on completely and show you what I'm doing to process those. So let's go back to here. Ooh, that's not good. Alright, so what I do is, you can see I just mainly highlighted the main ones that I need to remember where they are. The rest of them I can just kind of watch the levels and figure out what they are from there. So for the kick, I have two things on there. I'm sorry, that's snare. Kick. All I have on there is compression. Sounds really good the way it is. I didn't really do much but compress it to give it a lot more of a clicky and just thick sound, so turn it on. It's pretty good. Next is the snare. I put compression and reverb on that, so what it would sound like normally. Pretty wimpy. Compression. Nice and tight. And then some reverb. It's a good snare. Alright, so kick and snare. Cool. And then I didn't process anything that I don't have a color tag on, so I can turn the rest of those on. And then the overheads, didn't do anything to those either. They sound really good the way they are. Cool. Next is probably just ambience. Don't know, turn that on, there's no levels, whatever. And then the room mic, I really liked the way that sounded, so I'm going to go ahead and solo that and play that for you. I just realized that's not actually the room mic. I don't even know what mic that is, because it would have the overheads in it if it was the room mic. Regardless, I'll put some compression and some reverb on there because it really reinforces the snare and kick when I do that, so the overheads already have enough natural reverb on them. I feel like I'd be overdoing it if I put more on there, so having that for just the kick and the snare, it's really helpful. So let me go ahead and turn everything back on, and then we'll go from there. Let me go through and make sure everything's on. That's on. All that stuff's on. On. Cool. You'll see I'm having a lot of problems with this pitch shifter, and I'm going to go into that. I'm not going to ignore it, but that's, you know, not for right now. So right now without that. Sounds pretty good. Alright, now for kind of the master track stuff and some other little effects I have in here. You know, what I do is I just go into the master and I have a filter on here. Fruity filter, easy to use. I went ahead and I just chose the preset called Party Next Door. So go ahead and turn that on. From the beginning, what it does is it just kind of, I did an automation envelope to kind of have it do a fade in. And how I would do that is really simple. I have right here is the wet to dry ratio. So I did a just an automation clip by right-clicking and create automation clip, and what that does is it makes these things down here. So this is for Fruity Filter, as you can see. So it slowly, brings down the filter, and then kind of close on the last measure of the intro here, I have it drastically go down fast. So. And that provides for the fade in. And then I have another little thing here with a master volume slowly coming up, and then it kind of has a really fast nudge right when the main part of the song hits. And, it's just kind of reinforces the intro. And then the only other really thing I can think of in here is the pitch proof. So what I did was go ahead and can I just bypass pitch proof just to show this? Let's see if I can just pitch proof. So bypass mode. No. I guess not. That sucks. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it all the way on dry. So I had a little dissonant, right? It's dissonant. What I thought would be cool to do is to have a pitch shifter kind of slowly go up the pitch, right? So what it does is you can hear it kind of go up about an octave there throughout that. And that's all that is. I did that with automation clips. I had one of them here to turn it on only when that part comes, and then one of them to bring the dry signal all the way to wet in this little curve right here. So that is that part. Alright, and then the really last thing I did was I added an instance of iZotope Ozone on the top, which is it's mastering software, and it has a lot of stuff in it for like a master EQ and what's the word I'm looking for? Like a volume or a loudness, like a maximizer on it to make sure it's the absolute loudest you can get it without clipping. So I used just the Gentle Tube preset because, you know, I already have everything kind of the way I like it. I just needed something to bring it up to the loudest possible place. And I did a little bit of EQing here. You can see it's just slight curves on the top and the bottom to make sure it's as thick as possible. The harmonic exciter, I didn't change that. It was just part of the preset. Same thing with the dynamics and the maximizer. I left all that there. So I'm going to go ahead and start the song and then turn that on, and you can absolutely hear the difference when I turn it on. And that's my CPU lagging. But that's pretty much everything I do, and then I, just export that into a wave, and it sounds amazing, just like it does in the DAW. And then I upload it to SoundCloud, and it sounds really shitty because it compresses the high end, it sounds like. But yeah, that's my process. If you have any questions, let me know. Here to answer. Hope this helped. 20 minutes, Jesus. Okay. Alright, so bear with me because I'm pretty shitty.